Economic growth news from South Africa. South African economy grew by 1.2% in the second quarter compared to the previous 3 months in seasonally adjusted but non-annualized terms, according to the statistics agency. Economists that have been polled had forecast gross domestic product growth of 0.7% versus a revised 1% increase in the first quarter. Joining us to discuss, Chris Hart, Executive Chairman at Impact Investment Africa. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you. Can you tell us more about this Q2 GDP data? Is it encouraging? What do you make of it?
Encouraging because the forecast was actually for the economy to slow slightly, where it's actually accelerated slightly, compared to the revised figures. And that was encouraging because I think the lockdown is still having an effect on the economy. We still have the effect of the unrest that we saw in the third quarter that will come through into the numbers in the third quarter. Internally, the economy is still reflecting a very divergent pattern. Agriculture is continuing to do well. Agriculture is probably the sector least affected by COVID restrictions, and construction is really taking strain. And I think that's because that sector you've had lots of cutbacks as people work from home. There's less demand for office space, retail space, etc. And basically what's happening is that the construction sector is struggling, manufacturers is still struggling, but personal services doing well. Personal services includes, of course, the health sector, which, of course, is experiencing increased demand as a result of the pandemic. And so basically, mixed picture overall, but overall, the picture is encouraging.
Good stuff. There was a rebasing that was recently done. Can you please explain to our viewers, what this was meant to achieve as far as South Africa's economy being rebased?
Yeah, so the rebasing is basically it's more a statistical error. It doesn't change anything from a point of view of anything that's happening on the ground. It's really just trying to get a fairer statistical recognition of what the economy is about. And they found with that rebasing, the economy is about 11% bigger than what was previously estimated by the other statistics. I think Nigeria also went through that same process, and in that rebasing the economy catapulted in size above South Africa's as a result of that deep rebasing, and starts to reflect more reality on the ground. I think the rebasing also tries to take into account more the informal sector. The informal sector, I think, is bigger than is perceived, and that's because of the high unemployment rate. But it's very difficult to measure, what unemployed people are getting up to, if I could use that in very colloquial terms. And that is an economic activity, but not necessarily measured economic activity. And that I think there's an attempt to try and capture some of that as well.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, in our prior segment, we're just talking about the informal sector and taxing it here in Nigeria.
Yes.
Is Ramaphosa seen as being on the right path as far as South Africa's economic revival is concerned? You've talked a lot. You've been on an unemployment crusade, talking about how to improve that. How do you see how the president is doing?
Well, basically, all the measures really revolve around the government. Increased government spending, for instance, is one of the tools in a country that really can ill afford that. It's really shifting more resources to center on the government, and we've got the dichotomy between a very capable private sector and a very incapable government. And so it's really shifting resources. It's like in a company, you're shifting resources from profit centers to loss centers, and hopefully that will improve the economy, whereas in actual fact, the right capital allocation should be the other way around. There's a lot of policy disasters that are still on track. Expropriation without compensation, the whole question about maybe a basic income grant, almost an admission that the government can't create jobs and they're not going to really let anybody else to create jobs. So unemployment is continuing to be a problem. In 10 years, unemployment has gone from a horrendous 23% to up 10 percentage points to 33%. It's really unusual in the world. When one looks at unemployment around the world, you see South Africa really sticks out like a very sore thumb, reflecting that it's internal factors, not external factors, that are driving unemployment. There is a tendency to favor the big rather than the small, and the small businesses are really struggling. The COVID regulations really have the uncompensated price has been small businesses and the lowest paid workers that have actually been having to bear the biggest brunt of the cost of the COVID regulations. I always say tongue in cheek when Ramaphosa is speaking about these things, the disclaimer is no civil servants, were harmed in the formulation of these regulations, and that certainly is the case.
Thank you for that, Chris. Very quickly, just finally, if you can, unemployment and inequality, are those the two major things that South Africa needs to focus on in less than a minute, if you can?
Yeah, unemployment is inequality and poverty are a consequence of unemployment, and if we don't sort unemployment out, you will continue getting more and more inequality and more poverty. That's basically the equation that we've got. It's not these things equally. It's really poverty and inequality is a consequence of the unemployment.
Great stuff. Chris Hart, of course, of the South Africa, the Impact Investment Community. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time today. That's going to do it for the Global Business Report.